All right. We've got, Colin Liddell. Colin, how's it going, mate?
Yeah, hello, Luke, or good morning, or whatever time it is where you are.
And what do you make about this latest wave of deplatforming of Richard Spencer, Jared Taylor, Stefan Molyneux, the Donald subreddit, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised. There is an election coming up in America, and I think that's part of it. This has been on the cards for quite some time. We also have a very kind of tense situation in America, a lot of hysteria, obviously, with the Black Lives Matter phenomenon going on, partly driven by the coronavirus lockdown. You have all this kind of pent-up energy, and it's sort of like it's a very interesting situation. At times, it seems so kind of neat and mechanical, the way that America is being quite obviously split. It's almost like some sort of strategic attack on the weakness of American society. That's what it looks like at times, because this is like the fault line of America, this whole idea that, Black Lives Matter sits astride. And of course, this, the sort of basic crack or flaw in American society is this fundamental lie of equality between very different groups of people. And whether this is just by chance, a number of chance factors working towards this, or whether this is something more sinister, the whole country has been very, very neatly split along this fault line.
One thing I really enjoy about your analysis, Colin, is that you don't waste much time in fulminating and talking about how evil the opposition is and the libtards and the brain dead left. You're able to just focus your analysis on what's actually happening and trying to understand what's happening, and it's such a relief compared to most commentators in our sphere of things who are just filled with rage, which just seems so pointless and counterproductive.
Yeah, well, I think it comes from, like studying a lot of history. I mean, I tend to enjoy reading history more than anything, rather than the latest, tweets and news and so on. And I think when you read history, you tend to take a more dispassionate or detached view of how things work. And I think that's probably part of the reason. But of course, it's probably just because of my personality as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to try to approach these things, and there's just so much bad news for people on the right. But I try to look and think, where's the positive? And if live streaming for dissident right thinkers gets essentially shut down, then dissident right thinkers will have to go back to writing, which may have a very salutary effect on their thinking and on the quality of their output.
Yeah, I know, but very few people can write well, so I think what will happen, though, is that right-wingers will find an alternative platform. If they're all kicked off and they're forced off YouTubes and the Twitters and all the main social media networks, they'll just go to other networks that'll sprout up from time to time. And I mean, I think what should happen, you'd think that somebody like the Russians would actually create something that would be just as technically good as YouTube, and then that would be very kind of interesting. I mean, I always thought that the Russians should be providing strong alternatives, because they basically want to stir up division in America, and if from their point of view, if the right wing is completely stifled, that's not a good thing. They want America to be as divided as possible. And I guess from a kind of geo-meta-political point of view, they would be worried that the big tech in America will shut down the right and in some way impose unity on American society. And that's the last thing that the Russians or the Chinese want. They're probably quite happy to see all these social tensions and contradictions coming into play and weakening America.
Yeah. So you've got post here, Trad News temporarily shutting down due to coming U.S. election censorship. So what's going on?
Yeah, I did that a week or so ago. I just thought that I was getting too many signs that there was going to be a big purge, a big cull, and so I didn't want to be doing too much newsy content. And basically, another thing, I did a story about George Floyd that kind of went semi-viral, in as much as a story can go viral when you're heavily shadow banned. And the story did very well, but it attracted attention, and as a result of that, we kind of lost our Patreon, which was generating a kind of fortune every month. I think it was about almost $40.
Whoa! Now, is this the article, Gentle Giant turns out to be a violent ex-con and a junkie?
Yeah. That's it's not exactly titled that, but yeah, that's the one.
Wow.
So I thought, with an election coming up, and if I was writing, and the other writers of Trad News were writing newsy stories, and one of those newsy stories, for whatever reason, picked up a bit of heat and went a little bit viral, then, the current climate, the axe would come down. So I thought I'd just bow out for a few months and, let what will happen.
Right. And how significant do you think this Black Lives Matter movement is for, I guess, not just American politics, but for the West, because it's spawned offshoots all around the Western world?
I think it is actually very interesting in a number of ways. I mean, first of all, the America has, since 1945, American society has been, and not just American society, because America has been the heart of a kind of global system, and it's had to get a lot of other people on board. The Americans couldn't dominate the world by themselves. They needed to have a lot of cooperation from various countries. And it's all been based upon this fundamental lie of sort of group communism, so to speak. The idea that specific groups of people, i.e. blacks, whites, and whatever, are fundamentally equal and should, the logic of that is that they should enjoy fundamentally equal outcomes. And that has been the lie at the heart of American society, at least since the end of World War II. And, this is unsustainable. But luckily for most of the post-war period, the full logic of that fundamental lie wasn't really being brought out. But possibly because of the advent of, the internet and social media, and the way that things become more viral, and that the political correctness has become increasingly virulent, and the way that things get polarized by social media, these underlying basic contradictions in the American ideological makeup have been exacerbated and brought into a kind of clash. And this is it's very difficult to see how this can be put back in its box.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think a good deal of the population is quite skeptical of the claims of Black Lives Matter. In fact, even hate them, but they just see the elite is so overwhelmingly arrayed against them that they're just keeping their head down and going to work and looking after their families. So the people who are protesting, generally speaking, they don't have jobs, and the people who are most opposed to the Black Lives Matter rioting, they do tend to have jobs and obligations, and they also see very little cover, so they're just keeping their heads down. But I can't imagine that they're being converted to the cause.
Yeah. But the thing is, Black Lives Matter is actually aligned with the premise of American society. The premise of American society is, group communism, i.e., that these groups are inherently equal and should therefore enjoy equal outcomes. That they're actually Black Lives Matter is aligned with that fundamental basis of American ideological society, and this is one reason why I almost feel that this is a put up job by some enemy of America to sort of split the country down the middle. Because as long as America is based upon that lie, and as long as that lie is being brought out into the open by this kind of polarizing culture that we now have, this is going to have a very destabilizing effect on America. Not only is it going to animate and make blacks more alienated and aggressive, it's going to have a very interesting effect on white people. I mean, from what I can see, white people are becoming much more racialized in their thinking because of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is proven to be a much more effective white nationalist party than anything the alt-right ever dreamed of doing.
Mm. And these latest deplatformings, it seems like it's to me it's primarily a reaction to incentives on the part of advertisers. That advertisers want a safe space to apply their products, and so to me that is the primary motivation behind big tech censorship crackdowns. I don't think it's primarily a matter of trying to get Donald Trump or trying to get Republicans. To me, it's big tech reacting to market forces. What do you think?
Well, it's good to be parsimonious about these kinds of things and not to kind of jump the shark too early with outlandish theories and so on. But there have also been some interesting attempts to kind of fact check Trump and some of his tweets, and so you're seeing. I mean, there are outright bannings going on with people like Stefan Molyneux and Richard Spencer and so on. But then also social media is becoming a bit creepy in the way that it kind of tries to curate what you post. Like if you post something about coronavirus, underneath your post, there'll be a little link to an official narrative story on the COVID-19 outbreak and so on. So it seems to be driven by more than just economic interests. I mean, obviously, they would like most of the content on YouTube to be, soft, cute, and fluffy, and so on. But if that happens, also a lot of people are not going to bother clicking onto YouTube. It'll be boring. I mean, like Brett Stevens' article points out, it's going to make it actually a bit pointless, and so they're economically, the argument could be made that they are shooting themselves in the foot.
Hmm. Any encouraging news out there?
Encouraging news? Well, I'm not particularly discouraged by any of this news. I mean, it's just going to push things into another direction. It's just going to make other things happen. I mean, Black Lives Matter. What is Black Lives Matter going to achieve? I mean, they're going to basically create situations where cities that are run by Democrats and that have a large black bloc vote will tone down their policing to the point where crime will soar, insurance costs will shoot up, businesses will start pulling out, and you'll have a kind of Detroit effect. And I'm not sure if that's really a bad thing, because for these kind of like smug leftist Democrat-run cities, that might be, poetic justice. It might be a good thing, and it might be a wake-up call for a lot of people. Why should I feel, morose at that prospect, really? So I think there is kind of bright side to a lot of these shadows that are, fleeting across the land.
And in the United States, we're having a resurgence of COVID cases. How are things in Japan?
It's not on the same scale, but yeah, occasionally there's little upticks here and there, but nothing to really write home about.
Right. So is Japan going to have a substantial advantage then? Because Japan never did this kind of mass shutdown. I'd have to think that their economy is going to be in much better shape compared to China and the United States.
Well, Japan's kind of quite dependent on the global economy as well, but it's going to be interesting to see the economic fallout of all of this. I think globally the global economy does seem to be shrinking. There seems to be more quantitative easing going on, so there's more money and less economy. So in classical economic terms, that should lead to enormous hyperinflation, but instead, I think most of it will be sucked up by the stock market at some point.
Now, we have this rioting and looting to, in part, tear down statues. And given that everybody who's ever lived has been incredibly flawed, that you can make a case for tearing down and destroying every statue that could ever possibly be erected to memorialize anyone. How do you see this playing out, this tearing down of statues in the West?
Well, I think it's going to reach a kind of psychological saturation point. There is a logic to it, obviously. I mean, there's a kind of twisted left-wing logic to it. I mean, once you start with saying this guy, he was a slave trader, and we've got a fucking big statue of him. People are angry. Okay, everybody understands Black Lives Matter. Pull it down. And once you do that, it's the first domino. And then after that, every statue is basically every statue is up for grabs. And then you think, wait a minute, like New York City is named after the Duke of York, who was later James II and King of England for a few years. And he had enormous holdings in the slave trade. So you've got to rename New York. And then, of course, you've got St. Louis. This is a city in America named after some, horrible kind of bigoted anti-Semitic Christian king, which is basically every single Christian king in those days. So you've got to rename St. Louis, and it's becoming so laughable. And of course, Washington, I mean, it's like Mount Rushmore, right? Mount Rushmore, it's two slave owners, a colonialist, and a guy who wanted to send all the blacks back to Africa. You've got to blow that the fuck up. So I think American people will just get kind of overloaded with this, and I'm not sure how they're going to get out of it. I mean, because they've kind of crossed the Rubicon by allowing this to happen, and it's not, it's very important. Large segments of the American establishment have participated in this Black Lives Matter bullshit. I mean, we've seen all the big corporate players on board. We've seen the Democratic Party on board. We've seen a lot of people in the Republican Party, the kind of Mitt Romneys and all those kind of people kind of signaling as well. So, and of course, I should also point out the mass media and the various kind of religious groups. The Catholic Church has even been partly responsible for a lot of this. And it's going to be very hard to see how they can draw a line. But at some point, people will just become so exhausted by all this constant hysteria, and they'll start tuning out in very large numbers.
Yeah. Now, everything that we do that impacts other people, it always causes a reaction. For example, if I walk down the street and I smile at people, most of the time people smile back. And so the Black Lives Matter movement has a tremendous amount of energy right now, but it has to provoke a reaction. it's impossible that it would not provoke a reaction. We're not seeing organized reaction right now, but it has to be building.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is. Yeah, it is building, but that's what makes it so interesting, because there's no obvious comeback. Like in metapolitical terms, the backlash has been disarmed before the thing that it's supposed to backlash against even emerged. But through political correctness and through constant censorship, the means by which the backlash could lash back have been disarmed. And so it's like one of those lotteries where the jackpot is going to be delayed, and it gets bigger and bigger. And so it's going to eventually, it's going to find a way through. There's going to be like some sort of opening, or something will happen that will enable the backlash to morally justify itself in some way. But right now, the backlash is building up, but it hasn't got a convenient enough moral avenue to strike back down.
Yeah. I was just listening to Andy Nowicki's recent video on why normies still trust the media, and I find it very helpful to listen to other people's point of view, because often it stimulates me to figure out what I think. And Andy was denouncing the media as being filled with lies and propaganda. And as for this theme of the title of his video, why normies still trust the media, to me it's all about trust the media for what? If the media tells me the temperature in Tokyo right now, I trust the media. The media reports to me a stock market result or a sports score, I trust the media. If the media tries to give me an interpretation on an event, then I try to deconstruct it. So I think it's silly to just discount everything that the news media says. It's all lies and propaganda. I feel like I can read the LA Times, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post every day, and when I'm getting spun, I feel like I can spot it. I don't feel like I need some special decoder ring. So I understand where they're coming from. They're generally coming from a kind of center-left consensus within their peer group that most people in most professions, they want to look good to other members of their profession. That's more important than their reputation in the public in general. So how do you relate to news media?
Well, yeah, I mean, I always look at a news story in terms of, where is the hard information? I mean, that's the only part of a news story I'm interested in. Like who said what? Did they actually say that? And why did they say that? Or what happened? Who did what to who? All that kind of very basic factual stuff. Because a lot of news stories are complete, and now, especially nowadays, a lot of news stories are just complete waffle, made up by because somebody said a slightly off-color word in a certain situation, and a lot of other people kind of lost their minds, and that becomes a big news story nowadays. And that's not really the kind of news story I'm interested in. I'm interested in something which has a lot more hard information in it. And if it doesn't, I just lose interest, really. That's my personal relationship with the news media. But I think distrust is a labor-saving device, because once you've had a few bad experiences with the media, you're going to trust these things, and you feel you've been lied to, or you think the media is pushing an agenda that you don't agree with. I think you develop a certain amount of distrust, and then it's just easier not to take anything the media says on trust, and to be completely cynical or skeptical about it. And I think a lot of people are in that position, and you can't really blame them for doing that. I mean, we've created a world where there are a lot of advantages to believing in conspiracy theories. It does simplify reality. It saves you a lot of time sifting through things and thinking, oh, actually, this article in the New York Times is not really that bad, and it actually says some kind of interesting things. It saves you all that kind of trouble. So I can, this is the world's become a little bit too complex and distorted for most people to comfortably understand it and feel at ease with it. And I think we're creating a world of mass kind of distrust, and a world where more and more people will have a kind of bit of a conspiracy theory, paranoid outlook.
And how much do you think the news media shapes people's political opinions?
I think it's sometimes overrated because I think, like I say, people tend to react to the news. If it confirms what they already believe, then, oh, this is great news. I believe this. This is completely 100% true. And then if it doesn't, people will find reasons to disbelieve it or undermine it. But there are a lot of, there is a large group of, what you could call floating voters, people who don't really have opinions on a lot of things, and they tend to get swept along with, there's a large kind of rootless, intellectually or politically rootless group of people who probably do get swept along by the things that seem to be in fashion or in favor, or which, well-known media personalities or celebrities that they know are going along with.
And how effective do you think propaganda is?
Propaganda is a kind of weapon, and any weapon is effective if it's aimed at the right spot. And if you see the whole Black Lives Matter phenomenon as a kind of as a sinister instance of hidden actors destabilizing American society, you could say that piece of propaganda, by aiming at exactly that spot and bringing that underlying contradiction in American society to the surface, that is an incredibly powerful propaganda. Something like that, you could say. So propaganda, if it hits a fault line, it can be very, very effective.
That's interesting. And what books are you reading these days?
I think my main reading material is JFC Fuller's Decisive Battles of the Western World, which is a very interesting book, and JFC Fuller's a very interesting man. And this is kind of interesting book because often I have arguments with kind of Nazi-tarred people, and they always make the case that Hitler didn't do anything wrong. He was didn't do. He was a nice guy. He didn't do anything bad to anybody. And what you need to do in cases like that, if you cite a mainstream historian, they'll just say, okay, this is just the mainstream narrative. It's all controlled by the Jews, etc. But it's very useful to have a kind of reference to somebody like JFC Fuller, who was a member of the British Union of Fascists, who met Hitler, who's somebody who was actually highly respected by Hitler. But his view of World War II is still that Hitler made all these atrocious errors, and he was too cruel and genocidal, and that was part of the reason why he lost. So it's kind of useful in that context. But it's also a very interesting and entertaining and fun book to read, because Fuller gives you a lot of hard history, good facts, how things work, etc. So it's and he's also a very good writer.
Tell me his name again and the name of the book.
JFC Fuller. Actually, he's one of the guys who invented the Blitzkrieg. That's another reason why he's very well known. Hitler was actually a fan of JFC Fuller to a certain extent. I think there's a story that he went over to Germany in the 1930s, and he was an honored guest at one of the big military maneuvers that Hitler was attending. And Hitler said something to him, what do you think of your children, or something like that, looking at all these tanks going through their maneuvers.
Sorry, is this book that you're reading, is it The Decisive Battles of the Western World and Their Influence Upon History?
That's it, yeah. Yeah, there's it normally comes in three volumes. And I get the feeling that he's a little bit out of favor with the big publishing houses today. But this is quite a recent thing. He was very much a mainstream historian until quite recently, and then I think now a lot of big publishing houses are because of the hysteria and the political correctness and all the madness that's afoot in the world. They thought, okay, we better not. It's not really the best time to republish JFC Fuller. So but there's plenty of old copies of his books around, it seems.
Okay, so I was having a discussion with people about who controls the narrative, and I was making the argument that the narrative is different than the megaphone. Obviously, the news media, big tech, the big TV news networks, big publishers, they hold the megaphone. But my argument was nobody controls the narrative because the narrative takes place inside our minds. And so no matter what the megaphone tells me, it's not going to change the narratives that I use to understand the world. So how would you respond to the question, who controls the narrative?
Well, the narrative is, I think usually the narrative is what everybody's talking about at a certain time. And right now that narrative is, Black Lives Matter and poor George Floyd and America's police are so militarized. So probably that is the narrative. I mean, you have your own internal narrative, and that's a different kind of narrative. But usually when people talk about the narrative, they're talking about the news narrative, and that is largely controlled by the news media. I mean, there was that abysmal Russiagate story, which was a complete nothing burger for I don't know how many months, probably a couple of years. That was the narrative. Like Trump's controlled by the Russians. Trump is Putin's puppet, and that was a narrative. So I think sometimes the narrative and the megaphone are one and the same.
And which are your favorite newspapers?
I mean, I sometimes read newspapers, but I don't really have a favorite newspaper. I think almost every newspaper I ever pick up these days, I just like leaf through it. There's a headline. I don't actually read many of the articles.
So you don't subscribe to any? Like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal?
Oh God, no. I used to read the Japan Times, but I think you subscribe to quite a few newspapers. Yes. How many?
Yeah, 4 off the top of my head.
4,
and then one sports website as well.
And do you read through them quite closely? It must take a big chunk out of your day to go through the papers.
Yeah, I'd say I spend between 1 to 2 hours a day. And so where do you primarily get your information? From YouTube, from the radio? Where do you get your information about what's going on in the world?
Oh, obviously from the Luke Ford show, because you obviously have quite a good troll through the media for me. You do you read your 4 newspapers, you check what's going on in the world, and you kind of and also you timestamp everything, so I can quickly check. Oh no, I'm not gonna. Nah, he's going to know about Spencer again. Nah, forget that. Oh, that's much more interesting. Yeah, like that. So you timestamp things, which is good, and that allows me to sort of dip in and out and find interesting things. So that's one example, but there are other people and sites that I follow to find out information.
Do you think there's going to be a backlash against China as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic?
Some people seem to want that to happen, but I think it sort of creates problems as well, because China is very much a major part of the global economy. Almost everything seems to be made in China. So, what can you do? All these supply chains would be disrupted if we started to get a little bit confrontational with China. We're kind of forced to do business with China simply because things would cost a lot more. Also, the global economy is badly shaken by this COVID outbreak, and so it's kind of a bad time to try to be isolating China. I think if the global economy was a lot stronger, then you could. Yeah, and if the American government was actually a lot more popular, like, if Trump was like a popular president, then you could maybe start to push things in that direction. But America's very weak at the moment. It's very, very divided. It's very, very distracted. The economy's under direct threat from all these lockdowns and so on. And I don't see the political will in depth for America to take on China. And you might say maybe that's why they, if you're given to conspiracy theories, which of course, we are not, you might say that might have hypothetically been the reason why the Chinese might have released the coronavirus on America, to kind of weaken it in this way, timed for the election year, to bring out all these divisions, to put the American economy on the back foot so that Trump couldn't go into the election signaling hard on containing China. So there's a lot of interesting potential for a conspiracy theory there as well, I think.
How would you describe Matt Forney to someone who doesn't know him?
The thing that defines Matt Forney is I think he's actually a very good writer. I always liked his writing. It was always quite punchy and easy to read, and he made good points strongly. So I always liked that. And it's a pity he doesn't really write as much as he once did. He's also quite an entertaining podcaster, because he has this kind of way of getting kind of triggered about things, which is very amusing, and he says a lot of interesting stuff, and he's quite forthright in his opinions, which is refreshing. So yeah, I quite like most of Matt Forney's content.
He did a recent stream where he said he was kind of afraid he might crack as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and being stuck in Albania. How has the pandemic affected your mental health?
Well, I think in the case of Matt Forney, he's in Albania at the moment, I believe, in Tirana, and it's kind of like limiting his professional options, his ability to make money. So if your economic base is, if you don't have much of an economic base, something like the coronavirus is a big threat to your economic base. And once your economic base is threatened, then you're psychologically you're under a lot of stress. Luckily, my economic base is pretty solid. I believe in saving for a rainy day and investing wisely and so on, blah, 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 So I'm not really bothered by things shutting down or maybe losing a job that I might have done or something like that. I can handle that. I can take all that in my stride. And of course, Japan is not as badly affected as a lot of places. Life is more normal here than it is in most of the rest of the world. The Japanese are not going through all the kind of hysteria you see elsewhere. So, I think no problem, really. How about you, Luke? Has it had a bad effect on you?
Well, it did catch me initially. The first 2 weeks, I was getting up every morning and checking the LA Times to see what the latest was with COVID in Los Angeles. And for a week or two, I stopped setting my alarm to go off at 5:30 in the morning. So I was getting an erratic start to my day. Then I was getting caught up in the news. And then I missed 2 moderately important phone appointments, which is very unlike me. So I'll admit the first 2 weeks of the shutdown kind of knocked me a little bit off kilter. Then about 2 weeks in, I resumed setting my alarm for 5:30 a.m. and I then took up the challenge of trying to read a book a day. And so that has kept me very busy and very motivated since then. So yeah, I was knocked a little off stride the first 2 weeks, but since then I've been a pretty happy guy.
Yeah, it just gives you a chance to do different things. I'd say. I mean, if certain things are shut down, then you just do something else with the time, because one thing I've always found there's never enough hours in the day to do all the things I'm interested in or want to do. So it's actually convenient if you actually lose some of the things you normally do, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of, I notice, a lot of people bemoaning and bemoaning all the things that they've lost the ability to do, but then it just opens up all this time to do other things that you've kind of had in the back of your head that you should do, but now you've got the opportunity to plunge into them. So anything else going on in the news that you'd like to discuss?
Oh, not really, no. So probably time for me to go out and do some jogging before it gets too hot here, so that's what I'm going to probably do next. And I'm not going to really think about the news too much today, hopefully.
Okay, cheers, Colin. Great to talk to you, man.
All right. Cheers, Luke. See you.
Mate. See you, mate. Okay, great. Colin Liddell. He operates a couple of websites. Affirmative Right is one of them. So affirmativeright.blogspot.com. And then he also operates trad-news.blogspot.com. He got in a little bit of hot water for an essay. Gentle Giant turns out to be an ex-con essay about George Floyd, who was getting his life together after spending 5 years in prison for a violent breaking and entering and sticking a gun into the stomach of a pregnant woman.